Hello, welcome to this video. There is a movie that recently came out that you may have heard something about. It is the latest Marvel movie to come out, released by Sony Pictures, and it is Madam Web. Now, you may have heard not so good things about this movie. It's currently sitting at a 3.8 on IMDb and a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, I've actually seen the movie. It's Saturday. I saw it 2 days ago on Thursday. So, acknowledging that this movie has been out for less than a week, I want to offer some thoughts on the movie, give you a rundown of what actually happens in this movie, some general thoughts on how the movie was made and how good or not good it is, and then give you some insight as a die-hard Spider-Man fan into who these characters are, what their general history is in comic books. I've been reading Spider-Man comics for a little over 10 years at this point. I don't remember the exact numbering, but if I just count issues in the main series, it's been like 238 issues or so that I've been reading. So I'm pretty invested in the Spider-Man storyline. Gonna give you some insight into that, and otherwise, enjoy the video. First thing I want to talk about is what actually happens in this movie. I'm gonna give you a not so brief overview of the plot. Now, I did not take notes during this movie. I was actually the only person in the theater. I did see it at a 2:45 screening on a Thursday in an independent movie theater I like to go to. You know, that's probably a reason it wasn't that full. But I was not taking notes during the movie. I just saw it and then immediately tried to write down everything that happened from memory. So some of these details aren't going to be exactly in order or like exactly perfect. So this is to my memory what actually happens in Madam Web. We start the movie. It is sometime in the 1970s in Peru. We see an 8-month pregnant woman who is hunting for spiders in the Amazon rainforest. This is Constance Webb, played by Carrie Biche. I don't know how to pronounce that name. Her pregnancy is never really exactly shown to us. I didn't know she was supposed to be pregnant until she said some line about the baby kicking and not letting her do her work. Her guide through the forest is Ezekiel Sims, played by Tahir Rahim. It took me a while to figure out that this was a different actor and not just Justin Long doing a voice. So anyway, Constance Webb, she finds the spider she's looking for. She wants it for like some sort of medicinal help. It's got good powers, or its venom can be used to treat things. Whatever, that's not important. She finds the spider, but Ezekiel ends up shooting her and taking the spider for herself. But as the sort of struggle is ensuing and she's like on her side, dying out, a race of powerful spider people who are native to the jungle come and they swoop down from the trees. They fight off Ezekiel, who manages to get away with the spider, so he didn't really fight them off that well. But these spider people called the Aranya, they show up. They're covered in like this vine-looking thing that's supposed to look kind of like a web of sorts. The spider people, they're all introduced in like these really flashy, quick cuts. Some of the shots are like sped up, so it's faster than reality. So we definitely know these are not just regular people. There's some sort of, they're an ancient tribe of spider people, of course. So anyway, Ezekiel gets away. They save Constance, and they bring her to some cave that has a glowing body of mystical water or something. They lay her down in the body of water. They deliver her baby for her, and then deliver some sort of prophecy about the baby. I don't exactly remember what they said. Also, the spider people speak English the whole time. You know, I get it. Maybe they just didn't want to bother with subtitles. This hidden tribe of Peruvian spider people speak perfect English. So they deliver this prophecy. She's got some powers or something because she's been birthed in this water, or like she's part of now this history of spider people. That's the beginning of the movie. Now, it's 2003 in New York City. We cut to an ambulance that's going really, really fast. It's being driven by our star. It is Dakota Johnson playing Cassandra Webb. Her EMT partner is Ben Parker, played by Adam Scott. So anyway, as they're driving through the city, within like 30 seconds of the scene starting, they drive past a Blockbuster because this is 2003, of course. While they're driving, Ben makes some comment about like, oh, I haven't been this unsafe in a vehicle since I was fighting in the war and they were shooting at me. Just like a really bad, haha, your driving sucks. And Cassandra makes some sort of line along the lines of like, what, you've never been shot at Queens? You get it because Ben Parker gets shot, and that's like Spider-Man's backstory. So a little bit of a foreshadowing moment there. Clever. Anyway, so they end up getting onto some bridge. They save some person. I think you see this in the trailer. As they're saving this person, though, Cassandra falls off the bridge and like crashes into a big body of water. She has this sort of out-of-body vision experience where like her soul is like drifting in front of her. It's weird. All she did was like fall in water. Anyway, she's taken out of cardiac arrest, but she starts feeling kind of funny. She's getting all these deja vu moments when Adam Scott's trying to like take her vitals and everything like that. She's able to predict really small things, like knowing what her oxygen level is going to be. So something fishy's kind of going on. So whatever, now we cut to a hospital. The family of the person that they saved is there, but like Madam Web is like really awkward around kids and she doesn't know how to respond when a kid wants to like give her a drawing or whatever. Anyway, so they're there. She's awkward. She's not good with people. Character development. So then Ben passes along an invitation. The two of them are going to go to a baby shower for Ben's sister-in-law, Mary. Mary Parker, the mom of Peter, of course, but we don't know that yet, and I don't think we're ever gonna. So we arrive at the baby shower. The song that is playing on the radio is What's Up by Four Non Blondes, because again, this is 2003. Emma Roberts is there. She's pregnant. That would be Mary Parker. So Cassandra gets looped into playing like baby shower games there, and one of the games they're playing is like, write down your fondest memory of your mom, and then, you know, we'll pull it out of a hat and we gotta guess who it is. You can tell Madam Web is like not really fitting in with this crowd. They're, you know, this kind of really basic playing baby shower games crowd. And so Mary Parker pulls out an empty one and Cassandra reveals, oh, that's mine. And they're like, oh, you don't have any fond memories of your mom? And she's like, oh no, actually my mom died during childbirth. And just like continues to just talk about dying during childbirth in front of like this very pregnant woman. And also all the other people in the baby shower. It's played off funny, like awkward cringe humor, like secondhand embarrassment kind of joke. Is this her tragic backstory? There's like touching on like, oh, I don't like my mom because she died. And like, I resent her because she died hunting spiders right before I was born. So anyway, they just decide to move on to another game, which is guess the name of the baby. So they're sitting around guessing just basic names like Steve or like other white people baby names. And at one point, Mary Parker was like, no, actually, the baby's name is going to be. But right before she says the name, they, like, pop a balloon so it, like, distracts everything. Because I don't know if Sony is allowed to acknowledge Peter Parker. So it's this tongue-in-cheek kind of, haha, we're never going to bring up Spider-Man. That, like, popping balloon ignites another sort of deja vu moment. And she's like, we've already done this. Why are we repeating this? And everyone's looking at her like, oh my god, you're crazy. What do you mean we've already done this? So Ben and Cassandra rush off to some explosion. There's like a fire. They gotta go save some people, doing their job of an EMT. While the building is on fire, Cassandra's just like very casually doing chest compressions, but kind of like looking around, still kind of in this fog of deja vu. And then someone just calls her away, so she just walks off in the middle of doing chest compressions. She runs up to one of her friends who's about to leave for something else, but she's like, I had a vision. Something bad's gonna happen if you drive this ambulance. Let me drive. But they're like, Cassandra, you're crazy. I'm not letting you drive. You gotta go do this other thing. And as he drives off, he immediately gets hit by a truck and dies. So I guess Cassandra was a little bit right about that one. Later, she's at home. She's like making friends with a stray cat that walked in from out on the windowsill. She lives like several stories up, so I guess stray cats just hang out several feet up. She makes some comment about how they're both strays and they gotta stick together. Very cliche line, feels more like a Catwoman line than it does a Madam Web line, but I don't know. It's always nice to see cats in movies, so I'm not really complaining all that much. Now, I don't remember if it was this time, but at some point we see her in her apartment and she's watching the 1951 version of A Christmas Carol. Also, it's like the middle of summer, so why is A Christmas Carol on the TV? And it's right as Scrooge is saying something to the ghost of Christmas yet to come that's like, are these the shadows of things that will be or things that may be only? So yeah, this little like, ha ha ha, looking into the future. Is this the real future or can I change that future? It's a little Easter egg. It's kind of like, why is she watching this? It's just so on the nose. But like, I couldn't help but be like, all right, come on. Like, that's funny, but in the funny of like, it's dumb funny. For some reason, she leaves the apartment. Whatever. I don't remember why. There's another scene where they're just like driving and they like pull into a parking lot and there's this massive billboard for Beyonce Dangerously in Love because remember, it's 2003. That all happens. That's the introduction to Cassandra. So we're decently well into the movie at this point. We've had like a lot of stuff happen already. This is kind of just the introduction to the character. It happens extremely fast. All of this happens like within the first act of the movie. We haven't even met most of the other characters yet. So, intro, the bad guy of the movie. So there's this guy, Ezekiel, and he's hooking up with someone after a trip to the opera. You never actually see the stage of the opera, so I don't know which one they were doing. I don't recognize the music though, so whatever. We see that back at his home, he's like rich or whatever. He's got a nice like loft apartment in New York City, baby. He still has the spider that he had captured those years ago. He reveals to this person he's sleeping with or has just slept with that he keeps having visions of getting murdered by 3 women, which is a great conversation to have post making love. We actually get to see the vision he's talking about, and it's like these 3 spider women, the ones that we keep seeing in the trailer. So he talks about how he really wants to find these women and kill them before they can kill him. What he's decided he wants to do, so he's heard this thing that like the NSA can like track your location and all this stuff. Because remember, it's 2003. So he's going to use the NSA to like track them down and stuff. Lucky for him, the woman he just slept with actually works for the NSA. So he uses some power. He can like grip her arm and inject her with poison, and then uses that as like a blackmail of like, I'll keep filling you with poison if you don't give me your login info for the NSA. And so she accepts to doing that. She gives him the login information and her ID and stuff. And so for the rest of the movie, he has just some assistant who may or may not have a name. I don't even remember. Who's there kind of playing in this like, eye in the sky, I'm a hacker, I'm Oracle from Batman, and I'm gonna use the NSA files to find everything you need and all this other stuff. So that's the bad guy. He's using the power of the NSA to go and track down and kill 3 girls he's had a vision about. So in the next scene, we see this one in the trailers. Madame Web is on the subway for some reason. I don't remember why. And she's having these visions of like Ezekiel coming through the subway and just starts killing people because he's hunting for these 3 girls. These 3 girls that we see, the ones from the vision, I don't know why they're all on the subway either. Again, these are details I just kind of missed, but they're not that important. But anyway, these 3 girls are here. You don't remember these 3 girls, but we've seen all of them already. One of the girls we saw in the opening ambulance chase scene because she was like skateboarding through town and she flipped off an ambulance. One of the girls is the downstairs neighbor that we saw for a little bit, and then one of the girls was actually the family of the woman they saved before Cassandra fell into the water. So we have seen all these girls, and they're somehow connected to Cassandra Webb in some sort of way. So anyway, yeah, all the girls are there. Do they know each other? How are they all there? Not that important. So anyway, Madame Web is able to use her like future looking into powers to get these 3 girls off the train before we go and get them killed by Ezekiel or something. So anyway, let's introduce the 3 girls. First we have Sydney Sweeney playing the role of Julia Carpenter. Next we have Celeste O'Connor playing Maddie Franklin. And then we also have Isabella Merced playing Anya Corazon. Each of these 3 girls seems to kind of fit a different archetype of like teen girl characters you might experience. So Julia is like this kind of shy rule follower, still in her school uniform kind of character. She does what she's supposed to do. Maddie is like the antithesis to that. She's this rebel rich kid. She's always got her skateboard walking around on her. She doesn't want to follow the rules. And then we have Anya Corazon, who's the other one. Cassandra has saved the girls now, and they're being hunted down by Ezekiel, who's now wearing some sort of palette-swapped Spider-Man costume, and he's climbing on the walls or whatever. So Cassandra and the 3 girls are now on the run from Ezekiel. The girls keep saying that they're being abducted because they don't know this person, which is fair, but this whole being abducted thing, not that important. At some point, all of them show up into the woods because they've gotten into like a taxi, and they realize, because they're having a conversation, that they're all somehow connected to Madame Web. This is where it's revealed that like, oh, you're my neighbor. I saw you, I flipped off an ambulance. I saw you in the hospital. We see a bit more of the girls' personalities, and I say that in quotes because they're all just really one-dimensional, super cliche dialogue. This is where I think some of the humor of the movie starts to come out. We see moments of this in the trailer as well. This sort of rapport between three teenage girls and Cassandra, who really doesn't like children, as we've already seen in the movie. There's a line somewhere in there about Martha Stewart, and Julia says something like, "Oh, that's so sad what happened to her." Because remember, it's 2003. For those of you who don't know, Martha Stewart was actually convicted of a felony and spent time in jail for tax evasion, I think. And I think this all went down around 2003. So, an odd reference to include in this movie. Who is that joke for? What audience knows about this that is also watching this movie? So anyway, Webb goes, she's going to go get some help or something, and she tells the girls, don't act suspicious. So the girls decide, we're going to act suspicious, and they're hungry or whatever, and Maddie, because she's a punk, is like, let's go to a diner we saw. Let's go get some food. I'm hungry. There's lines about her being hungry several times. I don't know. It's relatable. So they go to a diner. Someone at the diner who's reading the Daily Bugle, a little bit of a connection there. Someone at the diner recognizes the girls and ends up calling the police. But if you remember, the NSA powers are being used to track the girls. So somehow Ezekiel intercepts the phone call, or he knows that they're there now too, and so he is going to this diner right away because he's like, the girls are there, let me just go kill them. Webb, meanwhile, looks into the future and sees, oh my god, they're about to get killed at this diner. I know where they are. But she's driving, she's hurrying to get there, and she's like, oh, it's not going to work if I just walk in and try to stop him. So let me do the next best thing, which is crashing a taxi into the side of the diner and beating up Ezekiel with that taxi. Anyway, that's what happens. At one point in the diner, the girls got really excited about hearing the song Toxic by Britney Spears. One of them even says, this song's going to be so big. Because remember, it's 2003. The song ends up being kind of the soundtrack for the whole scene, the whole crashing a taxi into the diner sequence. And honestly, I think is the best part of the movie. It's actually a really fun song choice for an action sequence. There aren't a ton of action sequences in the movie, and I think this one actually is not that bad. I mean, it's short, but Toxic is just a ton of fun to be playing over a superhero action movie sequence. So I don't know, I'll give the movie props on that one. So later, they're all in a motel, they've been saved from the diner, and they start revealing that they each have a tragic backstory. Julia's mom is in a psych ward, so she lives with her dad, who has since remarried. But that family doesn't really want her, so Julia decided to run away. Maddie's parents are rich and always traveling, so she decided to run away. Anya's mom is dead, and her dad got deported, so she ran away. This is some of the only characterization we really get from Anya. She doesn't do a lot through most of the movie, but also has the worst backstory of these three girls. She's been living alone in her apartment for months, she says, and that's just kind of sad, man. So after they bond over their tragic backstories, and Madame Webb kind of empathizes with these girls a bit because she also, remember, doesn't really have a family because her mom got shot hunting for spiders in the Amazon rainforest. The song they wake up to in the morning is Tiffany's I Think We're Alone Now. Again, a really not subtle kind of Easter egg because they think they're safe now. This movie is not subtle in any sense of the word. So the girls are up, she's teaching them how to do chest compressions, or something like that, whatever. So she ends up going to get Ben Parker to come in, keep the girls safe, hide them in his apartment or whatever, keep them safe from Ezekiel, because, they're being hunted. It's over an hour into the film at this point. There's 45 minutes left, and Cassandra just leaves the girls, and what proceeds is 20 minutes where she's just in Peru by herself. These three girls we've kind of been following who are also central to this plot. Nope, not here. It's just Cassandra in Peru. So anyway, she manages to find the exact spot, where her mom got shot, because she's got a Polaroid of a web. But the dude who saved her mom shows up, that spider person, but now he's fully dressed in everyday clothes, and he still speaks English. He takes Cassandra to the cave where she was born, and reveals that she's got some sort of power, some spiritual connection to this whole thing. He says the line, when you take on the responsibility, great power will come. A little subversion of the classic Spider-Man line, with great power comes great responsibility. Little clever thing they did there. It's at this point, or maybe it's later in the movie, I don't remember, that Cassandra has a vision of her own mom pregnant sitting at a doctor's office. And she hears this conversation between her mom and the doctor that she's gonna be born with a like muscular tissue abnormality. But her mom is like, I'm not gonna let her be born with that. I'm gonna go find a spider in the Amazon rainforest that can help prevent this, or at least treat it. So Cassandra decides, oh, you weren't being selfish and working when I was about to be born. You were trying to help me. So she forgives her mom, and they like are able to hug in this flashback. So she no longer has this resentment towards her own mom and starts to be like, oh, I have a responsibility now for these 3 girls I've been watching. I'm going to go back to America and like take care of them. So she gets back to America and she has a vision of where the girls are and she goes to find them. At this point, the girls are in a car with Ben Parker and Mary Parker because Mary's water had broke. So they're driving her to the hospital. Ezekiel is tracking them at this point, and he uses the power of the NSA to change all of the traffic lights to green so that Ben Parker will get into a crash and it will stop the girls where they are. So Ezekiel catches up to the girls. He lands on top of their taxi and does like the cool supervillain pose where it's like a low angle and it's like shooting up at him and looking all intimidating. This whole thing happens where he's like slowly standing up in front of a giant Calvin Klein underwear ad. But because Madame Web knows where the girls are, she's driving an ambulance and crashes through the other side of the Calvin Klein ad, knocking out Ezekiel. At this point, she's able to like save the girls. And so it gets into this whole big car chase thing where Ezekiel's chasing them and jumping over the tops of cars while Madame Web is driving the ambulance trying to get away. At some point, Madame Web remembers the place that was on fire earlier in the movie, and she was like, that was a fireworks factory. Let's go there so we can like fight off Ezekiel. That's going to be our plan. And so she has this vision of like going to fight there and all these fireworks going off. So that's what she does. So they end up going and fighting there. Again, it's one of the few action sequences in the movie. It's conveniently at a fireworks factory. So there's a bunch of fireworks going off. You get in your obligatory explosions in a superhero movie. They later make it up to the roof. Now, I am not opposed to product placement in movies. It's just kind of a way things get funded. It's whatever. You know, there's shots of her drinking Pepsi in the movie. There's a Mountain Dew at one point. Whatever. It's okay. The final battle of this movie takes place on a giant Pepsi Cola sign. Like a giant, each individual letter is like a new sign. That's a little beyond a basic product placement. Like you literally see most of the fight through like a Pepsi sign. So all the explosions and fireworks going off, it's like destroying parts of the sign. So at some point, all 3 girls become trapped, and Ezekiel has like the upper hand. Madame Web then, hearing the voice of the spider person from Peru, repeat the line about responsibility and power. The line we just heard like 15-20 minutes ago is already being repeated. And at this point, Madame Web astral projects her body into 3 different possible futures, one of each of herself saving the 3 girls. So she's able to like do all of these things at once because she can like exist in every possible future. She says some line to Ezekiel about like facing the future or something. I don't exactly remember what the line was. Like it just wasn't memorable. And also, sure. Like, okay, I guess that's the point he needs to take. So Ezekiel has this very cliche slow motion fall off the building. Doesn't quite fall to his death. What happens is that the second P in the Pepsi sign falls off the sign and it crushes Ezekiel and he dies. That's how he's crushed to death by a giant Pepsi sign. So anyway, Madame Web falls into the water, but she's saved by the girls who come back up and they're doing like a 3-person chest compression. You remember how Madame Web taught them chest compressions? We cut now, we're in a hospital. The 3 girls are around Cassandra. For some reason, she's blind now? I don't know. They don't address that. I guess falling into the water like made her neuromuscular thing act up, so she's blind now. And a nurse walks in and she's like, hey, are these direct descendants of yours? And she's like, oh yes, they're all mine. So you can see how it's looped back around into this like found family thing, like, oh, I've learned to accept these are my daughters. These 3 wayward children who are left without a home are now part of my home. So it's all come full circle here. This is the big, like, emotional, reveal. So we cut kind of to the epilogue. We're now in Madame Web's apartment. Madame Web is sitting in front of, like, a window that looks a lot like a spider web because, again, subtlety is not this movie's forte. The camera kind of pulls back and reveals that she is also paralyzed from the waist down. I guess that's, again, part of her muscular thing. She is in a wheelchair, but she also has these really sick sunglasses because she's blind as well. So the girls come back. They brought Chinese food. Madame Web keeps making cliche, I can tell the future, like, kind of lines, like, I know what you ordered for me before you even said it, or I'm gonna say bless you before someone even sneezes. Just like the most basic, I can tell the future, and you can tell that because I'm wearing sunglasses. But then she reveals that, oh, I actually have more powerful visions of the future. All 3 of you girls have these amazing powers that you will fall into, and you're gonna be great people. And as she's kind of saying these things, we're getting glimpses of these potential futures, which is where the girls are in, like, their spider costumes that we saw from Ezekiel's glimpses into the future. This is all we get of the girls in the spider costumes. This was featured heavily in the ads. It's not a part of the movie. It only exists in glimpses into the future. We don't see them actually become these characters. We just see what might possibly happen. So anyway, after we get these glimpses of the future, the movie ends. That is a rough, overly detailed recap of the plot of the movie. There are some details in there that are unnecessary for this description, but it's one of those things where I'm like, no, I did see the movie. And there are some details that are going to be hard to actually make you believe happened unless you yourself see this movie. But this is what happened. I don't want to, like, criticize the movie too hard. I'm not some sort of, like, movie critic who's just here, I saw it, so you don't have to. No, this is genuinely what happened in the movie. I'm not trying to, like, make it seem worse than it is. So anyway, getting into some more review aspects of the movie. First up, the acting. Now, I don't really think anyone in this movie is necessarily a bad actor. I think the biggest issue is that it's a really bad script. A lot of the acting is hurt because delivering bad lines can just make acting look worse than it actually is. It just makes everyone seem really uninterested in actually being there. Adam Scott basically plays Ben Wyatt from Parks and Rec with that sort of, like, flirtatious sarcasm style, but he's honestly barely in the movie. He's in, like, the opening scenes, and then he's kind of not in the rest of it. So he only does so much with a character who's barely there. Dakota Johnson, I think, sells the whole I'm not good with other people really well. I'm not as familiar with her acting career, but I think she plays that part decently well. She can come off as awkward despite the rest of the script being awkward. The awkwardness sells, but she ultimately, I think, lacks a lot of the chemistry with the other actors, I think partly because of the script. And so that chemistry is, I think, what really hurts her acting performance. Speaking of chemistry, I couldn't figure out if the 3 girls were supposed to know each other already. It makes a lot of sense for them to have known each other, otherwise it's purely coincidental that all 3 of them happen to be on the subway at the same time. It's a little too coincidental to really fit into this type of movie, but there's not a whole lot in performance that makes you think that these were friends previously. Like I said, the script has them all just kind of fulfilling archetypes. Like, none of them really get a chance to shine. Isabella, who plays Anya, is, like, barely in the movie. I guess she's good at math in the movie. That's, like, a detail that they add really late into the movie. They're just kind of there. They fit their one role they're supposed to fit, but they don't get to do anything with it. So no one really gets the chance to act well, is one of the biggest issues. Like I said earlier, I thought Ezekiel was being played by Justin Long doing a voice. A majority of his lines are delivered off camera or when he's not facing the camera. There are a few reasons why they might do this sort of thing. The first reason would be they just got bad audio takes and they've since redubbed everything he said. I don't think that's the case. Even a movie like this, it's too high of budget to be making those sort of, like, high school filmmaking mistakes of just getting bad audio takes. Some of the lines that he actually does deliver facing the camera, I don't know if it was just me, but it felt like it wasn't syncing with what his lips were saying. And again, this is just going off of my memory of the movie, but I feel like lip syncing lines shouldn't be that much of a distraction. Another reason they might like re-record his lines in post would be that originally they had him speaking Spanish. He is, I think, a Peruvian character, or, the movie takes place partially in Peru, so it's like maybe he's speaking Spanish, and they decided later, nah, let's just have him speak English, and we'll just like redub his lines. I don't think that's the case with this either, because I didn't see this lip syncing issue with any of the actual Peruvian spider people. And if anyone were to not be speaking English, it would be them. And so if I saw them speaking English naturally, I don't believe that Ezekiel would have originally been speaking something non-English, and they just dubbed his lines over in English. The third option, which is the most likely, is that they changed a lot of his lines post-recording the scenes, which meant that they then had to find ways to get the new lines in, like he's never facing the camera, or he's off screen saying the lines. That is the option that makes the most sense, and it's what I think actually happened making this movie. I can't verify that information, but watching the movie, it would make sense they changed a lot of his dialogue later. I think this is the weakest performance in the whole film. It feels like he's more or less doing a voice acting role, but he's not a good voice actor. A lot of the lines are delivered near monotone, devoid of any sort of emotion, so it's a really bad voice acting performance, and I ultimately think that's what this was a voice acting performance. The editing of the movie is mostly disjointed. It's not as bad as the trailer suggests. The trailer is obviously much more edited down, so it's going to have some more filmmaking mistakes that throw off the continuity and seem more jarring. It's not that bad, but the action sequences in the movie are really, really like messy and sporadic. They do super quick cuts that kind of start breaking like the 180 rule of filmmaking. It breaks the continuity, it breaks the flow of the scene from shot to shot. So it becomes very hard to kind of track anyone's position and what's going on. And it kind of feels like this quick editing was done to hide other mistakes like bad blocking, bad staging, continuity errors. It ultimately hurts the film because of this editing that's so fast, so choppy. It's already not an action-heavy movie, and so when these action scenes aren't done well, it really also hurts the film. I will say that this sort of choppy, sporadic editing does actually work in some of the early scenes when Cassandra is still trying to figure out what's going on. The deja vu, I think I've seen this already, fits well with a messy sort of editing style, because as the viewer kind of starts losing track of what's going on, it actually matches what's happening in the film, which is Cassandra losing track of what's actually happening. It breaks the sort of reality of the movie. I don't know if this was necessarily intentional, but nonetheless, I think that editing style actually fits what's happening in the movie. So I think those scenes are actually done well. But that's only a few times in the movie. It's the very early, pre-her knowing her powers, where she's kind of questioning, is this deja vu? Am I experiencing something else? The pacing of the movie is very strange. It fires its exposition off so quickly, and it takes a much longer time to get through anything else in the movie. It jumps to Peru over halfway through the movie and then just wraps everything up so fast that it seems almost like a parody. Pacing is a difficult thing to get right in a movie. I couldn't do it any better. But pacing ultimately comes down to how the movie was edited and also the script of the movie. Cinematography, because there's not a whole lot of action sequences, is mostly pretty simple. I will say it wants to kind of feel like it's doing this big, stylish, sweeping shots similar to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, but it's just not those, so it becomes a bit more disorienting. There's one particular shot where Ezekiel's like looking over the side of the building from up in his penthouse, and it like shows his perspective in this like weird warped fisheye sort of lens that really is kind of like almost vertigo inducing. I've seen on Twitter that apparently there's one shot, like a very quick segment, that was straight up taken from one of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies. I can't verify this information or not, but that kind of accentuates this is what they were trying to do, but they didn't exactly do it. Overall, it's just, it doesn't look that good in terms of shooting. Final thoughts on the movie. It is not a great movie, but I don't think it deserves all the hate it's getting. I think the movie tries to be a little bit too much. Is it a psychological thriller? Is it a road trip coming of age? Is it a comedy? Is it a superhero movie? It's kind of doing all of them, but not really any of them well, or really not any of them enough to feel like it's anything. I do want to give the movie a lot of credit for delivering the whole thing in under 2 hours. There have been a lot more movies getting longer and longer that start feeling really sluggish. I never felt bored watching this movie. I never felt like it was putting me to sleep. It's fast-paced in the kind of way that I'm still engaged. I'll also say that Madame Web actually has some sort of character development. It's a little cliched. She didn't like people, but now she's like a mom figure, so whatever. I mean, it carried that throughout the movie, so I'll give that some credit. The movie keeps getting compared to Morbius a lot, which is fair because it is a tangentially related Spider-Man movie about a character no one really is that familiar with. And also it's written by the same people. I think it's pretty reasonable that it's compared to Morbius because of these reasons, but I think this is better than Morbius. I think Morbius, apart from the memes about its Morbin time, was mostly very forgettable, and Morbius had a big issue of trying to do this cool, edgy thing, but it felt like a decade too late. I think Madame Web is a bit more lighthearted in tone. I wouldn't say it's a flat-out comedy, but it doesn't take itself that seriously. I think that this movie could achieve some sort of bad cult film status because it's got some really choice line delivery. It's otherwise just confusing at parts of like, why did they decide to do this? The movie is campy, but I don't think it leans far enough into that camp to really make me believe that it's intentionally doing these things. I think it's just bad, and that badness is just kind of a level of camp. Because of this, I think it's a bad movie, but I think it's fun. Like, I think you can watch this movie and laugh at it. It's not a good movie, but movies like this really kind of start bringing up the idea of what does it mean to be a good movie. You can have, like, well-made technically. I went over some of the aspects like editing and writing, but at the end of the day, if a movie's intending to give you a good time and have you enjoy something that was created and it did that, it's successful in some form. So you get this sort of dichotomy of good both in it's entertaining and good as in it's well made. I have seen plenty of movies that are terrible in terms of production that I think are a ton of fun, and I love them. I love horror movies. Most horror movies are not well made, but I love them nonetheless. Then I've seen some really well made movies that I just didn't like and they bored me. And I think Madame Web is kind of the camp, where it's not good by any aspect in terms of production. It fails at a lot of things, but I think at the end of the day, there's something to this movie. I keep seeing people talk about it online, and I think that's a big deal. It had been achieving meme status since like the first trailer dropped, and I think that has something going for it. So I think it's the kind of movie that people are going to remember and still talk about. Never necessarily fondly. They're kind of going to be laughing at it, but it's the kind of movie nonetheless that people can watch and enjoy. Get a group together, hang out, watch this movie, maybe drink a little. It's the kind of movie that you might enjoy. And the last thing I want to talk about as a massive fan of comic books is some of the characters' connections to the actual comics. How do the people in the movie compare to their comic book counterparts? Talking a little bit about the history. So first, Madame Web. Madame Web first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 210 from 1980, created by Denny O'Neil and John Romita Jr., otherwise known as J.R. Jr. She's originally depicted as like a much older lady. She's got the power of like clairvoyance, so she can see into the future and like make these predictions and stuff like that. She has myasthenia gravis, which I believe is the disease they mentioned in the movie, but I don't remember enough to say that it was for sure. So in the comics, she's always hooked up to this life support system that looks like a giant web. So she's blinded, her muscles don't work that well, and she's connected to a giant web. So that's kind of what she looks like by the end of the movie. I know Madame Web from the video game Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, which if you haven't played is a ton of fun. I really like it. You get to play as 4 different types of Spider-Man. But Madam Web is there. You complete like her missions in the web, which is your way of like 100% completing the game. She's also in some of the Spider-Verse Spider-Geddon comics, at least one of them. I didn't really feel like digging through my collection to figure out which one is she in. But because of her connection to the multiverse and being able to see different possibilities and different futures, she's a part of that storyline. Her final appearance in the movie, where she's wearing like a red leather jacket and like the sunglasses, is actually closer to the second version of Madam Web, who is actually Julia Carpenter, the character from this movie played by Sydney Sweeney. So on to Julia Carpenter. She first appeared as the second Spider-Woman in Secret Wars number 6 in 1984, created by Jim Shooter and Mike Zeck. This character in the black and white suit is what we see in the visions of the future in the movie. Julia gained her powers of Spider-Man when she was unknowingly signed up for an experiment and injected with spider venom. So, experiment gone wrong, she becomes a spider. Sounds familiar. She later goes on to assume the role of the second Arachne in Miss Marvel number 6 in 2006, which was a part of the Civil War storyline, later made into a movie. She now assumes the identity of Madam Web after Cassandra Webb transferred both her powers and her blindness onto Julia in Amazing Spider-Man number 637 from 2010. Madam Web, the original Cassandra Webb, died, I believe, at this point in the comics and passed her powers on, and her blindness. Thank you for that. Julia's been a part of the West Coast Avengers, the Omega Flight, the Freedom Force, among several other teams. Maddie Franklin. Maddie is the third person to assume the identity of Spider-Woman, making her first full appearance in Amazing Spider-Man number 441 in 1998. She did not, however, take on the role of Spider-Woman until the following year in Amazing Spider-Man number 5. For those keeping track, 5 is less than 441. Comics, if you aren't familiar, often like to renumber their series. This was the first time Amazing Spider-Man had decided, we're going to go back to number 1 as an issue. They've since done it like 6 more times. I have like 4 different versions of Amazing Spider-Man number 1, and each one is a different comic. She is the niece of J. Jonah Jameson Jr., which is actually referenced in the movie. When they believe they're being abducted by Cassandra, she makes some comment about like, I'm going to send this to my Uncle Jonah, who works in the newspaper, which is comic accurate. Maddie disguised herself as her father, taking the place of her father at a meeting called the Gathering of Five, which was some occult meeting organized by Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin. Maddie ends up gaining the powers that Norman was trying to get, and she became a crime fighter, inspired by her favorite crime fighter, Spider-Man. Anya Corazon first appears in the first issue of the 2004 relaunch of Amazing Fantasy, created by Joe Quesada, Fiona Avery, and Mark Brooks. She is hurt in battle between some mystical groups, and a member of the Spider Society heals her with a spider tattoo that grants her the abilities of a spider. In the second issue, she becomes the first to assume the role of Araña. Remember, Spanish for spider, the same name from the Peruvian spider people from the movie. And she uses these new powers to fight alongside the rest of the Spider Society. She becomes the third Spider-Girl when Julia Carpenter takes on the role of Madam Web. She passes on her Arachne costume to Anya, despite Anya having been powerless at the time. So there's this big trading of roles that kind of all happens in the exact same issue. Madam Web dies, so Julia becomes Madam Web. So Anya becomes Arachne/Spider-Girl, and then I think Maddie died in that same storyline. Spoiler alert. Ezekiel Sims, the bad guy of Madam Web, first made his comic book appearance in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 2, number 30, in 2001, created by J. Michael Straczynski and J.R. Jr. Ezekiel gained his powers similar to Spider-Man, but decided instead of being a crime fighter, he was going to run a business and never really got into crime fighting at all. Ezekiel possesses a knowledge of totems, which are people who gained their powers because of a mystical link to a certain animal. Spider-Man is the totem of spiders, and Ezekiel, being much older, having had these powers for longer, decides he's the one to inform Spider-Man of what this role is. He was like, oh, that radioactive spider that bit you, turns out was actually biting you to save you from the radioactivity and made you this superhero because of this mystical link. Ezekiel plays a major role in the Spider-Verse comic series from 2014 because of his knowledge of totems, because in this storyline, a group of people called the Inheritors are jumping through the multiverse, hunting down spider totems and eating them for their power. It is a really cool storyline, incredibly different from the animated Spider-Verse film, but features a lot of really cool spider people. Ezekiel in the movie does not really connect to Ezekiel from the comics. He's not a bad guy like he is in this. I guess his connection to the movie would be about a knowledge about spider powers, but that's kind of it. I don't exactly know where his spider suit comes from. I couldn't figure that out. So to wrap everything up, I think the movie's fine. It's not good, but it's the kind of movie I enjoyed watching. I sat alone in a theater by myself on a Thursday afternoon, and I had fun watching a bad movie. I think people online can be really harsh about things, especially on social media. But at the end of the day, it's a movie. It may be a trend of cash-in superhero movies that, no one really puts any heart into and they're soulless. But I watch all of them anyway. It's a thing I'm very passionate about. I'm going to keep doing it. So hopefully, this extensive review helps you decide if you want to watch this or not. At least it's an opinion from someone who's actually seen the movie and not just repeating things they heard about the movie. No shade. But yeah, thanks for watching. Go see Madame Web if it's still in theaters when you're watching this. If not, you can probably find it online at this point. I'm not going to say do it illegally, but if that's how you do things, that's how you do things. No, don't do that. Support your local independent theaters, support your local comic shop, read more comics, watch more movies, and stay passionate. Now I know what you're thinking. What about the post-credits scene? Well, you've waited all this time. There's no post-credits scene.